Since the crisis of the anti-COVID measures, I wonder a lot about the monetary scenario that come: inflation or deflation. On the one hand, to understand what inflation is, we have Milton Friedman, who explains that any inflationary phenomenon has its origin in an increase in the money supply. On the other hand, to understand deflation through debt, we have Irving Fisher, who explains to us that excessive debt beyond what the economy can reasonably assume ends up in an infernal deflationary cycle that disrupts very strongly the economic fabric of a country. Today, the question of inflation is vigorously coming back because the latest statistics in the USA show a 4% increase in the general price level. Today, let's stay ahead of the curve and look at the assets on which this inflation could be based. Come on, let's go. Intellectually, Fisher's debt deflation is a collapse of price due to defaults that led to further defaults until the system is purged of false values. The problem is that a sharp deflation cycle also leads to the elimination of companies that are doing well because too many of their suppliers and customers have fallen. An all too often used shortcut is the crisis of the 1930s. Yes, it was a deflationary crisis, but other factors intervened and amplified the drama. We can refer to the slow means of communication, but also the reaction of the American Central Bank. In short, if the same conditions were present, the consequences would not be the same because the world has changed since then. However, in the end, the economy can recover. If we were to go through a deflationary debt crisis, it would be catastrophic. The amount of effort it would take to rebuild a country would be proportional to the deficits we've run over the past 50 years, but it would be possible to turn the page in the absolute. On the other hand, to date, no politician in either the US or Europe is ready to enter such a crisis. As we have seen during the crisis of the anti-COVID measures, when the crisis hit the economy, all Western countries in great difficulty activated the monetary lever to ward off this famous deflationary cycle. So we have the answer to our question. This crisis, as it stands, will not be resolved by deflation. Our governments will prevent it by printing money. If they can avoid a deflationary crisis, can they avoid a great economic and financial crisis? History teaches us that they cannot. One can choose the modalities of the catastrophe, but one cannot prevent the catastrophe. In other words, we can never eliminate the risk. We can simply transfer it in time and space. First, when the Western government prints money, they transfer the risk over time by postponing the deadline at the cost of increasing the magnitude of the coming crisis. Secondly, when they chose to whom they gave the printed money, they chose the fraction of the population that will be most able to seize the existing wealth within the population. Printing money thus allows for the transfer of risk in space within the population. So what can we say about the looming inflation? First of all, we've been seeing it in the numbers for a while with our Nacer tool. In our inflation dynamics indicator, we have been seeing for months that the inflation trend is coming. Our indicator is built around short-term and long-term inflationary dynamics. On these graphs, which represent the countries we follow, a country is considered to be in inflationary phase when the blue line passes over the red one. We have been observing the rise in inflation since approximately December 2020. Concerning commodities, these price dynamics support our analysis. So it's no surprise when we see newspaper articles about shortages in many sectors of the economy. So the question is this: what will this inflation lead to? Inflation is still a relative price increase phenomenon. In other words, you will have price increases depending on how you go about increasing the money supply. Between 2000 and 2020, inflation translated into an explosion of financial assets, a rise in real estate assets, and a parabolic progression of the Western bond markets since the money went to the banks and the financial markets first. Today, everyone expects a general rise in prices because the money has been sent directly to households. However, I find it hard to imagine how an inflationary cycle could take hold on consumer prices because the main transmission belt of this inflation is wages. If we look at the shadow state unemployment indicator, which simply keeps the counting method of the 90s without taking into account the government's counting reforms, the US unemployment rate is above 25% today. The situation is very similar to that in Europe. So if you look at the inactivity rate in the American and European populations, you can't really imagine that companies are struggling to find staff. As a result, I find it hard to understand how an inflationary spiral could be set up on prices via wages. From this point of view, we would instead be in a permanent imbalance between inflation and deflation. This unstable equilibrium would be fed on the one hand by the tendency of the economy to collapse and on the other hand by the injections of liquidity to counter this natural deflation. This is more or less what we've been experiencing for 18 months now in the world. However, this is forgetting an essential component of the economy: energy. I naturally have an energy bias because I've studied and invested a lot in energy. I know these issues quite well. Today, we're coming to the end of a cycle that started in 2005. 2005 is marked by the peak of conventional oil. We've reached an annual maximum in the exploitation of easily accessible oil that year on a global level. In other words, we will never again exceed the conventional oil production we reached in 2005. As a replacement, the oil companies and the USA in the lead have started to develop unconventional oil more strongly. Oil from the bottom of the sea, shale oil, tar sands, and so on. To put it simply, conventional oil can be exploited for between $5 and $40 a barrel, while the cost of exploiting unconventional oil is in the range of $40 to $120 for the most complex to extract. Moreover, in 2008, a pivotal year in this energy transition, the price of oil rose to $140 per barrel in July. The price of oil also contributed to the subprime crisis because it had a strong impact on economic growth in America. Subsequently, on the energy side, the world has experienced two phenomena. On the one hand, the governments have massively encouraged the big oil companies to strongly limit their investments in fossil energies through numerous subsidies for renewable energies, and on the other hand, nuclear energy has been strongly stigmatized following the accident at the Fukushima nuclear power plant. In the end, the fossil fuels have suffered from a great lack of investment, while investment in renewable energies has exploded. At the same time, nuclear power production capacities have declined in the USA and Europe because oil plants are not being replaced. In Asia, the opposite policy has been chosen. China is opening about 3 nuclear power plants per year. The fact remains that today it is the whole of the West that finds itself under pressure with regard to energy. It is a key bottleneck because energy infuses the entire economy. Economic growth is ultimately just transformed energy. Put another way, just because you have energy doesn't mean you have growth, but all economic growth is impossible without the energy resources that go with it. The problem of renewable energies such as solar and wind power, which are the focus of most attention, is that they are not controllable and that our societies are not organized around the intermittency of wind and sun. The subsidy policies of the government over the last 10 years have led us to the shortage of energy while we have never produced so much. Instead of having hydroelectricity, nuclear power, and new generation fossil fuel power plants with low CO2 emissions, we have less nuclear power, as much hydroelectricity, aging and polluting fossil fuel power plants, and overcapacity in solar and wind power that produce electricity that we don't know how to use. Inflation is therefore likely to manifest itself in energy prices. And then if we enter an energy squeeze, then yes, consumer prices could go up permanently. Equity markets would inevitably go down because the economy would go into an inflationary recession, which is the worst configuration for market valuation. So yes, inflation is coming, but more importantly, we need to get away from the preconceived notions that we can see in the headlines and keep in mind that energy is probably the most serious problem for economic growth in the medium term. Having energy values in your big oil portfolio doesn't seem like a bad idea to me. And on that note, see you soon for new videos. Ciao.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like my videos, please subscribe and don't forget to hit the bell if you want to be notified of the next episode. And if you want to invest in the stock market over the long term or diversify your financial portfolio, I'm offering you an analysis of the 8 European star stocks to have. Thanks again for watching and have a great day.